You're live.
All right, welcome back here. Second week of fantasy football analysis for your favorite league, the Fourth Floor League. And let's just get right into it. I'm Tony Davis, your commissioner. And with no further ado, let's get right into some analysis.
Yes, we're going to go right away with our first matchup. I'm Spencer Brodden, league analyst and former Montgomery County Sentinel reporter. Our first one we're going to look at this week was last week's Joel-Tony matchup. The old rivalry. Tony, not very happy about how it turned out, particularly for one specific reason. And what would that be, Tony?
Adrian Peterson. I debated it right before. I was thinking, it's the only week I got him because I traded him. I should just start him. I totally should have. If I had, I would have tied Joel. He played well.
The last minute decisions that made this one go the way it did. Alfred Morris going for Joel, scoring 21. Toby Gerhardt going for Tony, scoring a measly point. But it's tough to beat a guy that puts up double digits in 7 of 9 categories each week. So, I mean, at least he put up a huge total. He put up over 100. You're going to win most weeks. So
exactly. We'll go into the second matchup here, and this one was a good one between Tom and Silk. Tom could not quite catch him at the end Monday night with Antonio Gates. What are your thoughts on this matchup, brother?
Back and forth battle here. The big Demaryius Thomas touchdown. Tom got the points for having Manning as the quarterback, but Thomas gets the big
offset.
old. That's right. Yeah, totally offset by Demaryius. And yeah, you'd expect Gates to come back. Everybody's been saying he's as healthy as he has been. You'd expect him to get more than 4 points against a pretty porous Oakland D, but you do what you can. And apparently Antonio couldn't do much in week 1, so that kind of spelled doom for our roommate Thomas Wick.
Yeah, I think more weeks than not, you'll probably see him make that margin up with Gates, but unfortunately just didn't happen week 1. So move on to the next matchup here.
Yeah, just a terrible week, just in general for our house. 0 for 3 throughout the house. I got nipped by the second lowest scoring player this week, Connor.
Yep, and the first to 70 game, really, is what it was.
That's
first
what it was.
Team to 70 wins.
It was basically a Wisconsin-Iowa Big Ten basketball game, first to 50.
Yep.
Whereas this was more of a first to 70, and I couldn't even make it. I made it to 69, It's about as well as I could do. Matt Forte, Jimmy Graham, and not a lot else. That's basically my story. No wide receiver play, and
don't need it.
Connor got just enough from Aaron Rodgers, Brandon Marshall to nip me in the bud. So I'll get you later in the season. Don't worry. That's usually how it goes with us.
Perfect. And we're going to move right on to our next matchup here. My favorite matchup of rivalry week is Bees and Bird.
Absolutely crazy.
Hilarious.
Crazy finish. Bees, I don't know what it is about him, but I think he's been involved in maybe 4 of the 5 ties we've had in the history of our league.
He just likes ties.
Tough crowd. Crazy going into the last Monday night game. Bird has to be thinking he's down and out. He's down 18, and he's got Nate Kading going.
Iowa.
The Hawkeye. The one Hawkeye he did go with this year. Did he go with any other ones? The starters, whatever.
Yeah.
And of course, Kading hits 5 field goals. 2 of them,
17, 18?
2 of them being 40-yarders and then an extra point. And you got yourself a tie, 86-86.
So I believe that's Bees' now 3rd tie in this league. And he still managed to text me the next day and say, "How does our league handle ties?" My response, I wanted to say, "You tell me." But
you get a tie, buddy.
It's basically a tie, 0-0 and 1, right in the middle. Didn't think we'd have any half-game leads this early, but we do.
They're tied for 6th and 7th in the league right now, if you're keeping track at home.
The 5th matchup was between the 2 Jakes, Hansen and Neubenstein. So, what are your thoughts on this game?
Another close one. I thought Newton might have it with his good defensive performance and with Brady going, but Brady didn't really put up all that much. Cam Newton didn't either for Kirby, but he had 2 really good running back performances like he did all last year with Arian and Donald Brown, and nipped him at the end, 88-85.
Perfect, and that'll bring us to our last matchup here. What ended up being the highest scoring matchup as far as the leader especially, and that would be our friend Nick Kirby, drafted by Ron Jeremy, taking on our number 1 team from the draft.
That's right.
Brian Woods. Thoughts on this game?
Really stomping him, in fact. Coming away with a 33-point victory in a week where it looked like Brian might be able to pull out a victory for the first time ever against Kirby in this league.
Just can't do it.
Of course, going with Fred Jackson and then having him get hurt early, that's not going to help you very much, only getting 1 point out of that.
Yep.
And then you've got 4 guys with at least 18 points on Kirby's side of the ledger. It's going to be hard to beat most weeks, even if everybody else is putting up single digits. So.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's going to lead us to our first ever segment of what we're going to probably end up going with Weekly Champ Mushroom Stamp. An opportunity for the champ to talk as much smack as they want. Smack to the entire league. And so I'm going to hand this over to Spence for the first week. And ladies and gentlemen, your weekly champ with 111 points, Mr. Nick Kirby.
Nicholas Kirby, ladies and gentlemen.
Woo!
Nick, thanks for joining us here today.
How's it going?
Great to have you. Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well.
Fantastic. First things first, I gotta ask, what is it about playing Brian? Happens to be your rival, but it's not much of a rivalry. All you do is beat
The
him.
kid can't set a roster to save his life.
Is there anything in particular that you've noticed in your matchups with him over the years that makes
I don't
him
know.
such an easy play for you?
It just seems like he can never beat me. Against the rest of the league, he's pretty much total domination. 20-6, I think it is. But
Just an incredible record.
yeah,
After playing Kirby, I think the winning percentage falls to somewhere in the 600 range,
Yeah.
I want to say. Now,
Not
Kirby,
great.
I have to say you've had some great regular season performances this year. What are you doing? Did you do anything in your preparation to look forward to maybe even postseason success this year?
can't look this early. Picked up Amendola this week. Jennings is not going to play, but besides that, not a whole lot of long-term goals here.
Do you have much in you mentioned the pickup of Danny Amendola. Do you have much in terms of a waiver wire strategy? It seems like you're coming from the back of the waiver order most weeks.
Yeah.
What do you look for out of that position?
Anybody that looks like they have a terrible matchup for the week, usually just try to replace them. Or if there's a good wide receiver available, because they're always hit or miss.
Sure.
You know.
You've got last week's second lowest scorer in Connor this week, and of course he's 1-0 because
Yeah.
he played me. What do you think going into this week's matchup with Connor?
He looks good. Aaron Rodgers, pretty much, he's got to dominate this week. First loss or second loss out of the last 17 regular season games.
Right.
So he's going to be coming out gunning, but I think I could beat him.
Sounds good. Appreciate your time here, Mr. Kirby. Thanks for stopping by the Cake Eater.
Thank you.
And that is your first, what do we call it? Something about a mushroom.
Weekly champ mushroom stamp.
That's the one right there.
Yep. So yeah, before we close out the day here, we're just going to go ahead and briefly talk about the waiver wire, and then maybe more importantly talk about this coming week's matchups really briefly. Spence, you want to go ahead and start it off with some waiver wire activity?
Sure,
led
definitely.
by, I believe you were the number one slot.
I was, and I went in a direction that probably a lot of people didn't think I would. I went with Joe Flacco. Took him as the backup quarterback, that kind of co-number one with Eli. Last week, I had a lot of holes in the wide receiver spots, but I'm still pretty confident that at least two of those guys other than Deshaun are going to step up at some point this year. And I think it'll be nice to have a guy to complement Eli. He only put up 12 last week, so just kind of play the matchups with that is what I'm thinking.
I had you picked for Dwyer.
Sure.
Who ended up going to Joel. Another great running back pickup for him.
Right.
Terrible draft, but look at him already. He's more than relevant, and so you might have to look out for him. He's doing the right thing so far as waiver wire pickups, obviously. Beating me with Morris, and now Dwyer, who I think is going to have a big role in Pittsburgh.
He is definitely moving up the old power rankings pretty quickly, as the last place team usually does in our preseason power polls. But
Sure.
some other pickups, of course, we've got Kevin Ogletree. He goes to you, Tony.
Didn't think he'd fall to me, but it's fine. Whatever. Throw
Sure.
a waiver out at him.
Another couple moves, the Kobe Fleener move, I like that one as well.
A lot of targets, and Mercedes Lewis for Jacksonville scored against the Vikings last week, so I'm hoping for the same result.
Definitely. A couple others that we are looking at right here. Randall Cobb going to Silk as he drops David Wilson.
And he's actually going to start him tonight against me. Funny that I play Silky after the big trade, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Right, definitely. And that was the big transaction from the past week, that going through. Silky now has the two Vikings running backs as well as Matt Ryan and Kendall Wright. Tony, on the other hand, has RG3, Marshawn Lynch, Demarius Thomas, CJ Spiller. How do you feel about your side of that ledger?
I like it. I'm going to start Spiller this week. I'm hoping Jackson's out as long as possible. I love my running back depth now. I love my wide receiver depth now. That's what I wanted. It was a more complete team, and I feel like I got it. So as the season goes along, if somebody needs some help, I might be able to supply them via trade. Otherwise, I'll just stack depth for the bye weeks. I love it.
It seems like Silk may have gotten a potential quarterback and running back one out of it, but it looks like you also got a good bye week quarterback, a running back 1/2, a running wide receiver 2/3, and right now Spiller is probably top 5.
Exactly.
With
That's what I'm
Jackson
hoping.
out, so.
Yep.
We go into this week's matchups now. A little bit look at week 2. What's
Yep.
coming up?
And for me, try not to be too biased on this one. I guess I am, but I think the big one for me, it's me and Silk. We pull off probably the biggest trade in our league as far as number of players, 8. And now, of course, who wins? We're going to find out who wins the trade, who wins the week. It's funny how fantasy works out that way.
Do you know if you guys
We'll
play
see
each
what
other again later in the season, or are you guys the other second matchup? Or I don't think there is one of those with us, is it?
I I'm not sure. It's either you or Silky.
Okay.
So, well, I'm not sure. We'd have to look at the schedule on that. But
It'd be
I'm
interesting
looking
to see
forward to
later
this.
in the year
Yeah,
as
maybe
well.
later in the year, exactly. But, the overall standings at the end will kind of tell the tale as well. But it's fun to get the early matchup here.
Definitely. I've got Joel this week. He's gonna kick my ass. I don't even really want to talk about that.
I think there's only one matchup that's two undefeated teams, or two 1-0 teams.
That's right. It's Nick and Connor.
Nick and Connor.
Who calls him Nick? What am I talking about? Anyway, the line right now is Connor by 5, but who can take that? It's take it with a grain of salt when it comes to these ESPN projections. Brian looks to get back on track by taking on another guy that needs to get on track, and he's smiling at me in the back. It looks more like a grimace, actually. Tom Wick. It's his Bushhurts versus West Coast right now. Coming up this week, you've got Breeze versus Manning. You've got McFadden versus McCoy. Just a lot of classic matchups that we were expecting to see throughout the season here. I'd have to give the slight edge, just in my quick perusing here, to Tom for the moment in time. I like his wide receiver trio this week a lot more than Brian's, although Brian does have some juicy matchups there. Well, it might end up in another tie. Who knows at this
Brian,
point.
of course, without Fred Jackson, but luckily he has the depth with Ridley.
That's the big blow. Of course, he's got a guy on the bench that scored over 20 points last week in Stephen Ridley.
The other matchups, you said...
We've got Bird versus New. We've got an 0-1 versus a slight loser. That could be another close one between those two coming up this week. Again, just looking at matchups, it looks like New might have a bit of an edge as far as I'm looking at it. All questionable are Bird's receivers going into this week. Roddy Hakeem and Nate Washington, all listed as questionable right now. Of course, that'll change throughout the week. But New has a little bit more health on his side right now, and that is why I have to give him the slight edge at this moment in time.
Sounds good. Wrapping up the matchups, who else do we have, bro?
We've got Bees, another 0-1 versus Mr. Jake Hansen, defending champ, 1-0. And this one, we're looking at two quarterbacks that were not in anyone's... Well, I suppose Newton was a top 5, but we're not in anyone's really first-round look this year. You went with a couple of, it looks like running backs first round. We got Arian Foster versus MJD, so that'll be interesting to see who does the best out of that. And yeah, we'll see if that 2 New England wideout format for Jake pays a little better dividends than it did last week for him. He found out a way to win while only getting, I believe, 7 points between Welker and Brandon Lloyd last week. Let's see if he can do a little better out of those two guys this week.
Great. So we talked about me and Silk. We talked about you and Joel.
Right?
We've now talked about our guy. Kirby and Brian. Correct.
Tom and Brian.
Tom and Brian. That's what it was. Kirby and
Connor.
Connor. That's what it was. The 2 1-0 squad.
That's right.
We got Jake and the Jake matchup that we just talked about right there. Is that it, or we have the last one here? Is
I think we're good, yeah.
I think we got that one too.
Yep.
Great, so thanks for tuning in again. We'll try to keep these videos a little shorter than the first one.
Yeah, not a half hour of info, I think. For
Exactly.
Here.
Good luck this weekend. Any final thoughts going into this one?
Yeah, hoping to be 1-1 after this one, but totally expecting Joel to be 2-0.
All right, sounds great. Again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Good luck.